Just as a reminder, you can visit us at thepandapod.com. That's thepandapod.com to grab our RSS feed, listen directly, and share PandaPod with your family and friends. You can also reach us directly via email through podcast at thepandapod.com. Thanks for listening.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Panda Pod. I am Jeff, and I am joined by my co-hosts Jacob.
Hey there.
And Wiggy.
What's up, friends?
And today we're in our second episode of season 2, and we're going to be catching up on some of our old favorites. We're going to be talking a bit about AI and about aliens and about anything else we feel like talking about because it's our show and we do what we want.
Hell yeah, I don't play by your rules, listeners.
Yeah, you don't control us.
Don't even play by the rules that Jeff just said. So
he's going to talk about everything but AI and aliens today.
Yep.
Just you wait.
Fuck it.
Hey guys, this is Jacob, and I'm doing World War II Part 2 today.
Yeah, it's going to be a real interesting episode.
We're going to have 3 totally separate conversations.
Yes, I love it. Okay, well, let's start out with AI, because I don't know that I have as much to say about AI, but I mean, it has been a really crazy couple of months in AI since we last talked about it.
Right. So why don't we put it in some context? When did we last talk about it?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I need to pull up our website and see when our last AI episode was.
It should have been probably around July or June.
Yeah, it's been since July 8th. Wow.
Okay, so we might have even talked about it in June.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, the amount of time since then is like, I mean, 6 months before that was like ChatGPT 3, not even 3.5.
Right. Yeah. The explosion since then has just been insane. I mean, let's just start out by talking about OpenAI and ChatGPT. But in the last, I guess it's 6 months now. Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, was ceremoniously dismissed by the board, and then the employees rioted and demanded that he come back, and a week later he was back on board and half the board was gone.
Yeah, right. So let me talk on this for a minute.
Okay.
So yeah, that's exactly what happened. But there's a little bit of nuance to it. So he was ousted by the board.
Right.
Then Microsoft ceremoniously hired him to head their own division.
Right.
their own division.
Basically saying, then, if they don't have him, they don't want to continue with OpenAI.
Right. And then Microsoft went and said, we want, as you know, the main investor, we want a whole new board.
So, well, even before then, Microsoft said, before they decided they were going to try to keep going on with OpenAI, they're like, hey, we're just going to hire on everyone who wants to leave OpenAI. Come on over. We got your CEO. You know, it'll be just like nothing ever changed over here at good old Microsoft.
Yeah. Well, and then they don't have to buy a company.
Right. Like, I imagine that there was like antitrust or something kind of concerns with that.
Oh, for
that
sure.
Probably is the reason why they went back with the OpenAI thing instead of trying to envelop it under, you know, all of the Bing platform. But
well, I mean, obviously, I mean, it telegraphs what they intend to do, which is they want that to be part of Microsoft. You know, but it's like maybe they're just. I mean, it's probably easier to delay it, right? I mean, even if it's illegal for them to buy OpenAI, it's probably it probably helps a lot of people if they have a good relationship now to just put that off a little further.
Well, it definitely makes AI seem more friendly to keep being under a nonprofit organization.
But they're not actually a nonprofit anymore.
Aren't they? Did they change?
Yeah, that's the whole reason why Musk was pissed off, was because it started as a nonprofit and they went profit with it. That's when Microsoft stepped in.
So the board changing was related
It was
to
investors.
restructuring as well.
I'm not showing anywhere where they said they're no longer a a nonprofit.
Yeah, they haven't been a nonprofit for a
I'm showing that
while.
what I'm showing here is at least as of November 2000 or 2023, they were still a nonprofit. I mean, maybe
Well,
they're making steps towards that. I mean, I know that was allegedly a concern of at least a couple of the board members, especially like the like ethicists or whatever that are on the board, like the AI ethicists. Is that the right word? Ethicist?
yeah.
Okay. Just sounds weird. Doesn't feel right on the tongue, but was that like I mean, okay, so
Okay,
let's do the whole
so yes and no. Yes. So I'll walk it back. They are still technically a nonprofit. However, um, because of the fact that they are putting profits, like they're essentially putting profit above everything else as far as priority.
Oh,
So
okay, I see. So they're actually they are not like OpenAI Inc. is a nonprofit, but OpenAI Global is a subsidiary that is a for-profit under OpenAI Inc.
That's correct. The nonprofit owns the for-profit company, which is strange. And
Okay.
yeah,
there's also a cap on how much you can get out of investments into the profit company. As
Okay.
in, like the not-for-profit company has essentially part of its ownership structure is that anybody else who invests, there's a limit on how much profits they can make back.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, another alleged reason that this whole thing went down was the Q star thing. Do you guys have you guys heard anything about that?
Yeah, I understand that it's a powerful like theory that they've come up with basically,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's possible that like some people were arguing about whether or not it should reach the public or how it should reach the public and that kind of thing. Is that
Yeah.
kind of a good summary?
Yeah, that's what I've heard as well. It sounds like it's a like a new methodology or um boy, methodology doesn't sound like the
Algorithm?
right word either. Yeah, yeah, a new style of algorithm that's just more efficient than the current large language models.
Right.
So, and the concern is that it seems to be much more efficient at well doing things that humans do. You know, the concern is that I don't think anybody's actually concerned that it's AGI, that it's artificial general intelligence
Sure.
yet, but that it's so
that is the
good.
rumor. That is the
Well,
rumor.
I know there is a rumor of that, but I just don't know that we're there yet. It'll be really crazy if we are, but at the very least, they're saying that this thing's powerful enough to put a lot of people out of jobs. You know, and that I think
Sure.
that's the concern. I think also the concern is how Sam Altman wants to release it. And this goes on to another thing I want to talk about, which is the enshittification of AI, um, the intentional dumbing down of what the general public has access to, and the bolstering of the API like back end capabilities of the AI tools that are available. Um, it really kind of limits what the public is able to do for it with it, and seems to be putting an emphasis on making uh making the tools available to organizations and companies that can make a profit off of it, as opposed to enabling and um giving the everyday average Joe like us access to it.
Right.
I mean,
Um,
my thoughts on that are, I don't know whether or not it's twofold, but also there's a limit at which we adjust to new technology. like everything's staggered, right? Like companies have access to technologies we are that are far above where they are when they're first like released to the public. And we can take cell phones as an example of that. I think that they definitely had the ability to create better versions of them when the first ones were already released. And so we have this staggered release of technology so that we have time to adapt to it.
Right, but I think this is a little bit different in that we were given access to a really good full product and then it was taken away and dumbed down. We've seen the capabilities of, like, let's say Dolly, for instance, within ChatGPT. The new Dolly version, when it was first released, it was far more robust than it is now. It would produce 4 images at a time and allow you to, edit those images and like reference those images and set bookmarks to those images if you wanted to. And I mean, now you get one if you're lucky, if it doesn't tell you that it's, too busy or it simply can't do what you want it to do. Um, it's just been really dumbed down to the general public. Whereas again, on the back end and the API side, companies who have access to, the um, those API tools are able to do all those things that we were able to do before. It
Yeah.
would be like if the, current gen iPhone came out before the, um, iPod, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, we're taking that back. Here's an iPod though. It's like, hold on a second.
Then we know Apple has alien
I
technology.
can't watch porn on this iPod. What is happening?
Yeah, there are the limiters, and it's kind of for people who are experimenting and trying just to see what it can do and what it can't do and what its limits are. Like that's really locked down. And like I remember when 3.5 came out because that's really when I started messing around with it more. Like I was underwhelmed, and the reason wasn't because I don't think it could do what I was asking it to do. I think, like you're saying, I think we just got a tampered with version.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, what do you think about the idea that they're doing that just because they don't want like lawsuits and stuff? Because I mean, for instance, when ChatGPT like literally first came out, in some ways, like that's the most powerful version the public has ever had, like without at least paying for their public license.
You mean when like ChatGPT 3 came out?
Yeah, when 3 came out, I mean, when it was when it first came out, and it would generate like unfiltered whatever. I mean,
Right, right.
like I'm not saying I mean, obviously, like the responses are a little better now. It's not like I'm not trying to say it is actually um worse than it is then, but like 3.5 is actually worse. But I mean, like it feels like eh, at least partially that they put a layer of filter in front of it in
Yeah.
order to avoid getting sued, or like ruining certain economies, like even economies that aren't official, like college papers, that kind of
Sure.
stuff. I
Sure.
mean, obviously the cat's out of the bag on that one.
Right. And I know I've mentioned this before, but this is why I'm so excited to get my hands on, like a version of ChatGPT on my computer, like an unfiltered
Right.
AI. I think once we all have that, things will be very different. I don't think that's not that far off either. I mean, you can already do it.
Sure.
Who was it? Facebook or Meta or whatever released
Yeah, Meta leaked,
Llama, I
and,
think it
and
was.
that was even before. That might have been before 3.5, or that was probably around the same time we released our episode. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
and they, yeah, so Llama was leaked, and then a bunch of stuff was built off of that. If you have a strong enough GPU, you could definitely run it. I mean, I think what people are mostly doing is using like Amazon's compute clusters and like purchasing computing power from Amazon to run their own ChatGPT setup, basically.
Right.
So I heard that Llama, the reason why uh, it's been kind of controversial is because it's open source and it it's advanced enough to where it can bypass the guards of other large language models and um, guards that like OpenAI puts on ChatGPT. Um, so it's essentially able to unlock more advanced versions of AI than it is of itself.
Right. Well, yeah, that's one thing that's interesting that's happened recently that people are doing that. They're jailbreaking AI with other AI.
Yeah.
Um, asking chat. I mean, if you jailbreak ChatGPT successfully, then you can ask it like, "Hey, what do you think is the prompt that will jailbreak you next?" Like after the next version comes out. I mean, and obviously it may not be 100% accurate about that, but I mean, it's I mean, I think it's a very interesting feedback loop that's been created.
Yeah. Agreed.
I want to say real quick, my wife hates all AI. Absolutely hates it. Like
I don't blame her.
ever since I like as a joke. This was not a serious thing, but as a joke, I asked it like, "Hey, write me a uh like write me a Facebook status that just talks about how important and how much I love my wife, right?" And I went and shared that with her, and that was her break moment. She was
Yeah.
like, "Nope, I do not like AI anymore. Like, there's no there's no way." and and it's it's funny, but there's also it leads to wild concerns. Like, I understand why they'd want to put specific filters and things on the AI and make sure that it's not and make sure that it can't be abused. But at the same time, as somebody who really values their own time and freedom and really wants to be curious, it really puts a damper on like opportunities for people because there's a lot of ideas and things that I want to use AI for that I just can't because I know the functionality exists. I know that it can learn to do things, but I don't have access to that. And that really sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
So like I guess the moral of the story is let's get Llama and try to hack into GPT-4. I guess that's what we need to do, right?
Yeah, I've installed Llama and a couple of the other like open source LLMs. And unfortunately my PC is just not good enough to do it. Like I can generate a prompt, but it takes hours. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
I was able to run Llama or run some version of Llama. That was it was like I mean, it was probably twice or three times as slow as ChatGPT. So
Oh, it's not so bad. My PC just sucks. Actually, I think when I was doing that, I might have been working off of a laptop at the time, so that does make a
ah,
lot of sense. Actually, maybe I should try that again now that I have my actual PC up and running.
just don't fry your graphics card.
True, it's all right. Wiggy will buy me another one. It's fine.
No, no more. No more graphics cards.
So I'm going to kind of segue into the next thing that we're going to talk about. And I'm going to do that by talking about Jacques Vallée, because Jacques Vallée just released a article, an opinion piece in, I can't remember. I can't remember the magazine, but he
Can
just
you
released
give
an
us
opinion piece.
a who that is?
We're getting into that. So Jacques Vallée was a computer scientist, or is a computer scientist, who was a part of the early development of the internet and also some early AI. Some of the algorithms and architecture that he built is what the internet is built on today. And he was a pioneer really in the AI research he was doing and the way he was using AI. And this is back in like the 60s and 70s. He was also tasked by I want to say a professor he was working with to figure out a way to use AI to find anomalous things in the sky. And I may be butchering that story, but essentially he got roped into studying UAP and UFOs. Okay. And that became a passion for him. And he ended up, using his knowledge of artificial intelligence to improve research being done on alien technology or NHI technology, UAPs, what have you. And today he is a proponent of disclosure, and he also has a lot of very interesting ideas on what these UAPs and NHIs are and how it may relate to AI. In the article he released recently, he didn't directly draw comparisons to, the non-human intelligences and artificial intelligence, but he certainly brought them both up in the same article and made some comparisons between the two situations. But he talks specifically about Q Star, which is that OpenAI next gen artificial intelligence we were talking about earlier, and how the government needs to figure out a way to I don't know, get that out to the public in a safe way, in a way that won't do economic harm. And he was also talking about how we need to do the whole big disclosure thing, and how he gave some really interesting points about how it would have been a lot simpler to do it in the 40s when we first started looking into these UAPs. And then there was another opportunity in the 70s, but politics were too wonky and nobody wanted to risk it. And now we are where we are now, where these tools that we have, these artificial intelligence and these computers and these advanced satellites and telescopes, we're getting to a point now that something that I don't know if he calls it catastrophic disclosure, but that's a term that's being thrown around, is this idea that we're going to just, as a general public, discover what the fuck's going on if the government doesn't come out and tell us, because it's just reaching a boiling point where that's going to happen.
Sure.
So, I mean, that kind of goes into our conversation about aliens then. I think I asked you guys to look into Jacques Vallée. I don't know if you guys did. What did you guys find, and what are your takeaways about what he has to say?
I didn't look into him all that much, to be honest with you.
That's valid. That's okay.
Yeah, I didn't either. So
all right,
continue on your way.
Okay. So he is very much in the camp of these artificial intelligences these non-human intelligences are interdimensional or extra dimensional beings. There's a term thrown around often when people are talking about Jacques Vallée's ideas, which is this like I'm trying to remember the name of it, like ultra terrestrial, I think is the term. Yeah, ultra terrestrial. Okay. Which is this idea that these beings have been here on Earth with us this whole time, that they exist on a different either visual spectrum or a different dimension, or who knows, but that we have the ability to interact with them, and that these non-human intelligences are what we would have in the past described as like demons or angels or fae, or cryptids of different kinds. These have all been the same phenomena that humans have been recognizing throughout history. Is just it changed, what we see and how we interpret it changes via the context of the time.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I am sitting on it. Like, I've been doing way too much research into it. I have too much spare time and I just can't stop looking at this stuff. And that, I think, is what I think is happening here, is that we are experiencing vision. We're seeing things that we can't explain, and our brain is interpreting it as, okay, this must be a flying saucer.
Right. Well, I mean, ultimately, when we experience anything, um, our brain has to like fill in some details. Um,
Mhm.
so you know, like an image transmit on a computer screen, like we can be pretty sure that looks roughly the same to everybody, but a being of pure energy, like what would that look like? Would your brain, would certain sensors in your brain even be overloaded to the point where they feel like they must fake what that is, like how that looks to you, so that you can like even envision it?
Right. Yeah. Your brain has to reckon it somehow. So it has to apply something that your brain understands, you know? Yeah. Our evolutionarily, we have been, training our brains to do deduction and to come up to, logical conclusions. But I mean, this very well may just be a situation where what we're seeing isn't logical, or as far
Sure.
as what we understand as logic, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's also obviously it's also possible like that if these were beings and they even exist like in our, like we don't know for a fact that they necessarily exist in our dimension, which means that they might exist outside of time. Um, and I mean, a being like that should be powerful enough, and it's like to control what it looks like in 3D.
Sure, sure. Yeah. I mean, and there's also the possibility that they simply don't care what we see of them, you know, that, what we're seeing is like the 3D shadow of their, fourth dimensional bodies or fifth dimensional bodies, whatever they may be. What we're seeing is just, the shadow of what they are. And have you guys looked into at all, like, what 4D objects look like and what their shadows look like in our world?
Well, I mean, you can kind of like think about it with the analogy of what happens when you're looking at something in 3D versus 2D, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that's about really the best you can do, kind of. I mean, like, maybe people have made some visuals that help.
Right.
Um,
There's actually a really cool tool on Steam called 4D Toy Chest, I think,
oh, okay,
which gives you a bunch of 4D objects to play around with, and you can see what they would appear like in the 3D world.
interesting.
Yeah, and it's really cool. Like, I was watching a video of somebody playing around with it, and I don't know, it really helped things click in my head, as far as the 4D thing. That, and like, going back to the old Cosmos episode where Carl Sagan explains the 4D thing. I don't know if you guys have ever watched that. It's really good if you haven't. Um, just
No,
the idea that, um, I mean, what he does is he shows we can physically build what the 3D shadow of a like tesseract would be,
right,
so and we may not be able to see the full tesseract, but this is what it would look like if it was in front of us in our dimension.
right,
And the 4D toy box does the same thing with a bunch of different shapes,
sure.
and it's really cool. It's really interesting. So
How do we know what the 4D shape is if we can't see it, though?
I don't know, go watch that Carl Sagan video. He does a good job explaining it, much better than I could. Like a cube, like
Thus,
a tesseract or a 4D hypercube would be a cube that extends at 45 degrees from each of its points. There's no 3D space for that to happen, so we can't create it. but we can, again, imagine what the shadow of that object would look like. And if you look at those things, if you look at like the 4D toy box, for instance, you'll notice that as you like move the 4D object around, what you see in the 3D world may make some sense, but for the most part, it just seems so illogical. It just seems like just mass changing shape.
Right.
Um, and when you look at some of these, UFO or UAP videos, that's what a lot of these things look like. They're just kind of these bright, shapeless objects that are wiggling about and don't seem to have a solid form. And yeah, that clicked for me when I was looking at the 4D toy box stuff. It looks so much like what those objects look like when you see the video of them just kind of morphing in the air. It looks like something moving through our plane that shouldn't be there.
Right. I mean, it makes a lot of sense too, with like the way they can seemingly disappear or move extremely rapidly all of a sudden.
Right.
Because I mean, that could be another piece. Like if you imagine a star, what a star would look like as it passed through a 2D plane. I mean, you would see the points of it coming through the 2D plane at different times, right?
Right. So it looked
And
like different objects. Yeah.
exactly. So it could look
Mhm.
like an object teleporting, or it could look. I mean, you would kind of see the same thing teleport in a way, um, and especially been moving quite quickly. So, I mean, I could, that makes a lot of sense. That does explain. I feel like if it's a vehicle, maybe it's a vehicle, maybe it's not, but um, uh, like the points or edges or something like that of a 4D object or more. Um, but could definitely explain like how a UFO moves.
Right. Right. Yeah, and that's another thing that I think Jacques Vallée may have actually mentioned in the article, but it may have been in another video I was watching. The idea that and you mentioned this, Jacob, the idea that a 4D or extra dimensional being wouldn't necessarily function in time, and
Right.
they would experience space much differently. So while it is possible that if this is the case that they are interdimensional or extra dimensional, um they wouldn't necessarily have to have been from Earth the whole time, because the distance between stars in a 4 or 5 dimensional plane could be arbitrary. you
Right.
know they could have come from anywhere.
Yeah,
Sure.
so when I think about the objects that move incredibly fast, right?
Mhm.
Or move in ways that our stuff can't. I think about them using folded space-time, right? Um, because this is one of the things that as people we can imagine that how this might work based on the information that we have available to us, right? You essentially fold the time that you're in, the physical space that you're in, and when you unfold that space, you can be in a different place than when you started physically.
Right, right.
So what I imagine happens is when that process occurs, I don't think it's necessarily instantaneous. I feel like there's probably some sort of extremely short lag time because we haven't been able to see anything that has ever been completely instant. Like instantaneous is something that we can't actually imagine.
Right.
And so what I imagine is happening is that there is actually a slow lag time in what they're doing, but it's just at this place where we're seeing like not not a mirage, not a mirror image, but we're seeing like a phantom of the movement,
Well,
if that makes sense.
if you try to walk in a 2D space, I mean, it's literally impossible for a 3D object to move in 2D, but like your best approximation would be to just walk in one direction in a straight line, but you would still stray off of that straight line, and you would still kind of like accidentally end up in like appearing in a way that you don't necessarily want from a two-dimensional perspective. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if we're talking about shadows, right? Like that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the near instantaneous bend movement. Like that's what makes sense to me in my head. I'm
Okay.
not a scientist. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about.
Yeah, well, at this point, you're just as likely to be right as anybody else. I
Sure.
mean, nobody
Right.
really knows. It's all worth speculating, in my point. So I
Yeah,
think,
and that like that's my speculation on the move issue, on the moving problem, is that there is something and it moves this way. And because it moves this way, it looks we're able to see things on the edge of our on the edge of our perception. Like we're not actually seeing anything full. We're just seeing the edge of it.
yeah,
I see that for movement, but the reason why I'm saying this is I can understand that with movement, but I don't understand that with the physical object itself.
yeah. Well, it's just maybe impossible for us to even comprehend.
Sure.
I mean, I'm sure there are people out there smarter than us who can.
There's
But
definitely people out there smarter than us.
well, sure. Yeah. I wonder if it's possible that some people have solved how to communicate with these beings, and that in doing so, it almost um uh, even if that's not your intention to do so, removes your ability to explain what this is to other people. Like in the
Hmm.
sense that if you let's say that you did get a team of like a crack team of the top 20 scientists who actually had expertise on this to work together, like and like your findings might I guess maybe like the process of communicating with them or something like that might not necessarily drive you insane, but like move you to a fourth dimensional perspective.
That's interesting. I like that term, fourth dimensional perspective. I like that a lot.
I have a counter argument to that, and that is so we know that um, everything has been compartmentalized, right? Like we've been
Right.
using we went over this, we've gone over this before, where like especially with the government, they've been using the nuclear protocols to hide information about extraterrestrial
Sure.
whatever.
Yeah.
And
Well, clearly there's
so
a cover up of something.
right. So that being said, then we know that that's how they operate. There's no way you get a crack team together because the entire thought behind it is that not everybody knows the whole piece.
Sure. Yeah, that
Right.
makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah, but
You
I
know,
guess if maybe if somebody did solve, I mean, because even though nobody knows the whole picture of the nuclear bomb, like somebody can still launch those things.
Sure.
sure, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, I
that's
mean,
true.
it seems like if the government's doing research into it, there's got to be somebody who's in front of the like behind the keyboard typing something. Like, let's say, I mean, assuming that they can contact them. I mean, that may be a totally baseless assumption.
I don't
Yeah,
think so.
you don't know
I
what the fuck you're talking about,
No,
Brev.
I think that there are I think there are definitely people in contact with them. I feel like I feel like Grush in particular has said as much. The idea that there are people who know the whole story, and they're just like, it seems like they're terrified to 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 talk about it, you know. And Tucker Carlson has been on this kick too. This, he claims to have some kind of knowledge of what's going on, or at least a gut feeling on it, that whatever this is, it's terrifying in nature. um and that goes into the whole like spiritual component about it. Like there's a lot of like religion talk going on right now about these things, um which really is what put me down that road of coming to the conclusion that these things are just what we've always associated with demons and angels.
I'm full on Anunnaki. I'm full on like
Okay.
Like you're
like
saying that, but does that mean that they're three-dimensional beings that exist somewhere else and have traveled here, like through three-dimensional space?
Right, the Anunnaki idea is that we're like experiments of other angels, right? Or not angels, aliens.
yeah, and there's correlations between religious texts and the idea of living extreme amounts of time, which is noted for so many different like like example, like Moses. He was like
Sure.
fucking 2,000 years old or some shit like that, right? Like,
Well, yeah,
and
Enoch in the Bible lived to be about 900, and he's the oldest person. I mean, if you would take the Bible's word literally.
right, and that's actually there's other beings and things like that that have been talked about in other religious texts as well.
Sure.
And there's and I'm gonna call this a conspiracy because I don't know I can't talk about the ins and outs of it because it's been a while since I looked into it. But there's supposedly a lineage of people who have this these like cone-shaped heads, and the genetics spread from Egypt into Europe, and there was members of royal families and entire royal families that had like the same like shaped head as like the pictures of what they call the Anunnaki. And like if we also assume or take on the thought process that we were genetically modified, right, in order to serve some purpose, or just as a fucking funny experiment or what have you, it makes sense that there would be some controlling factor in it for a while. And there's no saying that like those people or that race or whatever you may say could still be here,
Sure.
and
Sure.
they're just hidden well, right? I mean, you could go fit down 50 other rabbit holes at this point and say that, that's what the New World Order is and all that kinds of crazy bullshit. But like you can extrapolate from there. I believe it, like hands down. And it's because of what Jeff said before about like seeing angels or demons or seeing fae or something else. Like it makes sense that we just have interpreted that as a religious symbol,
Right.
because in early mankind we do know that like superstition and word of mouth as storytelling was how we did our history. And if you don't know a way to accurately explain something, you're going to do your best,
Sure.
but the phone game still happens.
Well, and it seems like also that how it's described to you will influence how you'll see it.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, I mean, that seems like an indisputable fact of reality. Like, at least on some level, how you hear and process things for the first time, like if you're hearing about it in advance, will affect how you see it for the first time.
Yeah.
So if it's always been called a fairy and you've been told those are real, and you see something weird, you're going to see a fairy.
Right. You're going to assume it's a fairy. You're right.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it may even look like a fairy, like a described fairy to you, because that's what your brain's doing to reckon what is in front of you. Yeah.
Sure. Right. I mean, if it was seeing something made out of pure energy or some other frequency that doesn't know how to process, but it knows it must render something there because there is something there,
Right.
then it's going to look like something weird that you've had it explained to you in the past. And that's, I mean, if it's inventing something whole cloth, anyways, picture to put there.
I
I mean,
mean,
you're really, yeah.
every time I see you rap, I see a Cyclops. So
Well,
Well,
let's talk about the jellyfish UAP real quick. Have
okay.
you guys
uh,
seen it yet?
No, but I did see you post the link. So do we want to start it all at the same time?
Yeah,
you
yeah.
watch it. Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead
yeah,
and
we've
watch
already
it.
seen it.
Oh, okay.
So Jeremy Corbell is a, I don't know, I guess a journalist. That's a really loose term to use for him, but he's a dude interested in UAPs who's out there working with George Knapp, who's a journalist out of Las Vegas, who was like kind of the pioneer behind the whole like alien disclosure thing in the like late 70s and 80s, talking about Area 51 and interviewing like John Lear and things like that. But they're working together now to push towards disclosure. If you listen to what they say, that they were a major influence in the whole you know uh, uh, government interview thing with Grush and all that, the congressional hearing. Um, they were there for that as well. But they just recently released a 3-part mini series on TMZ, which of course makes it totally believable. But and in this series, in the first episode, they released this never before released leaked video of what they're calling a jellyfish UAP. And it kind of looks like a jellyfish, kind of in the sense that it's got like appendages or what appear to be appendages dangling underneath it, as well as some kind of like form above those appendages. But it's very fuzzy, of course. And the video itself was shot in Iraq by the U.S. government, and what's shown is thermal imaging of an object moving across a cityscape. And from what I've heard, or what's been released by Jeremy Corbell and all of them, this object was not visible outside of the um, heat spectrum. There were people trying to spot it on the ground who couldn't see it. But what it did was move across the city and then move over a lake, hover over the lake, descend into the lake, and then come back out of the lake and shoot off in a 45-degree angle. The descent into the lake and the shooting off into a 45-degree angle we don't see in the video. I don't know why. I mean, maybe that part wasn't actually sent to Corbell, or maybe they're holding off, or maybe they're just making it up. Who knows? But yeah, this is what we have, and I think it's really interesting. There was talk that it could be like a bug splat or bird shit on the plastic housing around the camera. But I feel like that's been pretty well debunked, just because of the way it moves around on the screen, and the shifting of um, the color spectrum as it moves along. But I mean, yeah, it certainly could be that. But as far as like the descending into the water and then shooting up into the air, um, I guess until we actually see that, who knows whether it's real. But if that is the case, that isn't really something a bug splat on a housing would do.
Sure. Yeah, I just watched the video. It looks crazy.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen some like enhanced pictures of it, but that's AI enhanced, and it's trying to do what our brain's doing and reckon what's in front of
Sure.
it. So it's hard to say how accurate those are, but um, all of them really kind of point to like uh, a being of some kind riding what looks like a mech suit, essentially,
Hmm.
just kind of floating along there. Very, very spooky. And there's been other videos, particularly in South America and Central America, of similar sightings.
Yeah.
To be real, all of those could just be wild Southern American balloons, because they do balloons crazy down there. But at the same time, they're moving very strangely, and
Sure.
in very similar ways to what happens in the jellyfish video, where it just kind of is suspended in a position, rotating slightly, and just hovering in a direction, which is spooky to me. What is this thing doing, and why can't we see it?
Yes, it definitely looks inherently scary. I
Yeah,
mean, it's not like honestly, when I saw this, I didn't have any context at all. So my first thought um, was that it was modern War Machine. Like that the video, I didn't realize the video was from a little bit of time ago.
yeah.
Um, so my first thought was that it was an actual like just some kind of drone. Because I mean,
Drone of some sort.
it
Mhm.
seems like it could be a drone.
Yeah, it does kind of move in a drone-ish way. Although, again, that's temperature spectrum being shown, and if it is doing that, there's no propulsion that's shown. I
Right.
mean, there's
Yeah,
no
that's very
heat
true.
being given off or anything. It's just floating there.
Right.
But
So I've got a couple things on this.
okay, yeah, I'm interested to hear this.
Yeah, so I've got a couple things on this. Firstly, um, the whole like yeah, well, this is what I notice on this. So I actually dug a little deeper, and there's actually another video that's in the comments of the video that you linked on YouTube. And it's a video of something that looks very similar to what this is. Except it is visible. It's caught on a normal like camera. I guess the video's like some like 17 years old or something. Um and but it is visible. It's completely visible. And when I look at these two objects, I think of two different things. So the first thing that I think of is when I'm looking at this specific video, it kind of looks like a 2D object that was made for a video game. That's a static image
Yeah.
that's just kind of being moved across a screen. Like, so take for example, like making what that looks like. So we only see the black and white in the video. So, and you can easily change like the opaque and the colors of something to be, especially of a static image, and turn it into, and like add it to a video. Like,
Sure.
so that's what I see. I see something like a 2D image of, and to your point of like propulsion, right? They actually did this in early Star Wars movies. They had the floating drones that were
Yeah, it does look a
uh,
whole lot like a Imperial drone.
yeah,
I
and
did think that.
so yeah, so like I I think that this one might be Fugazi. Like I think it's easy enough to do if somebody with the know-how spent 10 hours doing it.
Well, but the thing is, there have been interviews and people who were on the like military team while this was happening have come out and said that yeah, they saw this. That I mean, they were there present for it. It's not like this is some video that is just been doctored and sent over
Yeah,
to Jeremy Corbell.
but this comes down to the same problem that we have with all of the information that's been given out so far, and that is everybody with a first-hand account hasn't hasn't or hasn't been allowed to say anything. Like, where's the video interviews of the people who actually say what they saw? Where's,
I mean, that's a little more
you
tricky
know,
because this
like,
is like from 2017, and those people are probably still working. You know,
yeah,
for the military.
but even still,
Yeah,
like, you know, so it's one of those things where it's really hard to justify it completely. Like, I don't know if I'm hopeful about this one in particular because it is kind of creepy.
yeah,
If you don't look at it as in the way that I'm explaining it, it does look extremely creepy.
yeah. I posted
Um,
another video of somebody who did a time lapse of it, showing it rotate as it's moving.
yeah,
And that is what says to me, okay, yeah, this is some sort of 3D object out there, you know. But,
yeah, but
you
you can
know,
spin 2D objects. Like, you can add extra pixels. Like,
oh
you
yeah, I
know,
mean, I
like,
understand what you're saying. If it is
yeah,
doctored, yeah, that's definitely the case. But
yeah.
who
And
knows?
to go back to the older video, which is caught on like an actual camera,
Mhm.
it's very the object itself kind of does like these either reflective lights or like flashlighty light bulb kind of things on the edges of itself, or when it's like supposedly like kind of turning or moving, and the entire thing looks like giant pixels to me. Like, even
Mhm.
in that one that's that old, it just kind of looks like big fat pixels put together.
Yeah. I mean, it's good
Like,
to have healthy, skepticism for sure about
yeah.
all of it.
I
Like
mean, it
I
I
certainly
mean,
don't know what this thing is for sure.
yeah, I mean, either of us could be wrong. Like, I could completely be wrong,
I mean,
or
more than
maybe
likely
they did
both
it
of us are very
incompletely. Yeah,
wrong. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
But that's what it seems like to me, and nobody else was saying that. But when I think about it, and the way it's moving, or it moves across the screen, and the way it does stuff, it just seems very animatronic. Isn't even the word. Like, not even early animatronics would look like this. Like,
What, like
it just,
claymation maybe?
yeah, it just kind of, I don't know. It's hard to explain, but it
Yeah.
definitely looks pixely or like 2D. But to your guys's earlier points, it could be a 4D object, and that's just
Sure.
what I'm seeing.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
That's another thing I definitely think when I look at it is like this shape makes no sense to be moving like it is. Maybe it's another object moving along that this is all we can see of it.
yeah, I mean, so that definitely could be the thing too.
Yeah,
But yeah, I'm calling sus.
Well,
that's
the
valid
incentive is definitely there to fake UFO stuff, especially right now.
for sure.
Um,
Yeah.
so
It
it's
always
not
has been.
there's got to be fake information,
Yeah.
clearly.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I mean, we had the Miami Mall incident, you
what's
know.
that?
Um on New Year's there were like fucking dozens and dozens and dozens of cop cars that were called to a mall in Miami. And at first they were saying it was for a like shooting that was taking place, and then they said that kids were shooting off fireworks. But a couple people that were at the mall came out and said that no, actually it was aliens, and they gave descriptions of them, and some videos came out of them. But it turns out it was all just people making bullshit up.
Sure.
or
They
allegedly.
also,
Maybe it's not. Maybe I've actually been fully psyoped here, but I mean, it seemed like it was just
yeah,
tensions high on New
they
Year's
also
COVID.
said that I also saw another explanation that it was just two girls having a fist fight,
What?
and there were like 30 cop cars there.
There were
It was
so
just
many cop cars and
two girls.
helicopters, and yeah, it was pretty wild. But I mean,
Uh,
yeah, I mean, sensationalist things are going to be popping up all over the place.
Well, that could be people faking that they saw aliens for attention. That could also be people
Yeah.
like who did see something
Hmm.
and saw like gray aliens or what have you because that's what the media is focused on right now a little bit.
Right.
It could
Right.
also be people who were pulling a prank to make people think they saw aliens.
Yeah.
I think so. I haven't seen or heard or any news or clips about the Blue Man Group in quite a while. And
Mm-mm.
I think they were kidnapped and they just didn't have sunlight for a while and
And they turned gray.
their blue turned gray. Yeah.
Okay.
And so they were just released they were, they broke free of their constraints inside of the mall. It
They're
was
doing like
just
an
it's just
impromptu show at the
yeah.
mall.
Yeah, it's just the Blue Man Group.
It just went totally awry. Well, I was in Orlando this past weekend where I saw Jacob. Thank you for coming down and visiting, man. It was so nice to give you a hug and see you.
Yes.
Um, and on Sunday, I was dropping some people off at the Orlando airport and then driving back to where we were staying. And on the way to the airport, we were all talking about how, we were kind of surprised we didn't see, or, somebody didn't say something about seeing an alien because, I mean, that's kind of our whole shtick. Aliens are what we kind of focus on. And we were like joking about it. And I was like, yeah, ha ha ha, whatever. Well, I dropped them off and I'm driving back. And as I'm driving back, I'm looking up in the sky. And I do recognize that I was obviously near an airport when this happened. But I looked up in the sky and saw a bright light. That bright light stretched out into what looked kind of like a like wiggle worm or snake kind of shape. It jiggled in the air, collapsed in on itself, and then disappeared.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was so fantastic to see. Like, it was a very like shocking thing to see. But at the same time, I was like, this probably won't even be the most interesting thing that happens to me today, because it feels like so common to see videos like that online now. Like I'm so saturated in it that I've seen objects similar to that on videos. I was just like, yep, I finally saw one. Time to go on
Sure.
with my day. And I feel like that is the real, like, I think that's the real psyop that's going on right now, is to make it so mundane that we just don't even care when we see it. So keep your eyes to the skies, people.
That was just some god jizz.
Yeah, it was just swamp gas. It was Florida. There's swamps, right?
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
me. I was
So,
flying home. I got the
uh,
Batmobile.
so, so that just reminded me of we need to have another episode on shrooms and stuff.
Oh, psychedelics.
Yeah, and psychedelics and stuff.
Yeah,
Because
I'm always down to
there's
talk
some
about that.
stuff that I want to get into there. Um, yeah,
Okay. Well,
and
we'll
if you
we'll add that to
understand
the docket.
And if you understand the reference that I mentioned before, you'll know what I want to talk about.
Wait, which
So,
reference?
Gajos.
Oh, I don't know that reference, but I'm
Yeah,
looking forward to hearing all about it on the
yeah.
next
Yeah.
episode of the Panda Pod.
Dun
Dun,
dun
dun, dun.
dun.
But yeah, let's go ahead and wrap it up there. Thank you guys for sitting here and talking to me about things that I'm always so happy to gab on about. These are my favorite things to talk about. So,
Well, this is a great topic.
Yep.
all right. Well, we will see you next time, and thank you for joining us. Have a great day.
Thanks,
Eyes on the
guys.
prize.
Thanks, guys.